Hello there, my friend. Welcome back to the English Talk community. I'm so glad you're here today because I know exactly what you're going through. You've been studying English for a while now. You understand movies without subtitles. You can read articles easily, but when it comes to speaking naturally, something still feels off, right? You know that feeling when you want to say something in English, but your brain first thinks in your native language, then translates it? Or when you speak and it sounds correct but somehow doesn't feel natural like a native speaker? Trust me, I've been there, and thousands of our listeners have been there, too. Today, I'm going to share with you the secret that changed everything for my students. It's not about perfect grammar or memorizing more vocabulary. It's something much simpler and more powerful than that. By the end of this episode, you'll understand why thinking in your first language isn't your enemy and how you can use it as a bridge to speak English naturally. But here's the thing. I need you to do something for me right now. If this topic resonates with you, if you've ever felt frustrated because your English doesn't sound natural enough, hit that like button. It tells me I'm on the right track and helps other learners like you find this content. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do it now because we're building a community of English learners who support each other on this journey. Now, let me tell you something that might surprise you. The fact that you still think in your first language doesn't make you less capable of speaking naturally. Actually, it might be the key to unlocking your fluent English. Sounds impossible? Stay with me, and I'll show you exactly what I mean. You know what? I want to start by telling you something that might shock you. Every single native English speaker I know thinks in their first language too. The difference is, their first language happens to be English. But here's what's fascinating, and this is something I'll explain in detail later in this episode. The process of natural speech isn't really about thinking at all. Let me ask you something. When you speak your native language, do you really think about each word before you say it? Of course not. You just speak, and the words flow naturally. But when you try to speak English, you suddenly become this careful translator in your head, right? You think of what you want to say in your language, then you translate it word by word, and then you speak. No wonder it doesn't sound natural. I remember talking to Maria, one of my students from Brazil. She said something that broke my heart. She told me, "I feel like I have two personalities. In Portuguese, I'm funny, confident, and expressive. In English, I become this boring, careful person who can't even tell a simple joke." Does this sound familiar to you? The truth is, you're not alone in this struggle. I've worked with thousands of students, and about 90% of them say the exact same thing. They feel like their personality disappears when they speak English. They become someone else, someone more careful, more hesitant, less authentic. But here's what I discovered after years of teaching and research, and this is the first secret I want to share with you today, though I'll give you the complete formula later. The problem isn't that you think in your first language. The problem is that you're trying to translate instead of connecting directly to meaning. What do I mean by that? Well, when you see a red apple, your brain doesn't think the word apple first and then recognize the fruit. Your brain recognizes the fruit directly and then labels it with whatever word you've learned for it. This is exactly how natural speech works, but somehow, when we learn a second language, we forget this natural process. I want you to think about something for a moment. Have you ever had the experience of knowing exactly what you want to say? Having the perfect feeling or idea in your mind, but struggling to find the right words even in your native language? Of course you have. We all have. This proves that meaning comes before words, not the other way around. Now, here's where it gets interesting, and this connects to the main strategy I'll share with you in a few minutes. Native speakers don't sound natural because they never translate. They sound natural because they've trained their brains to connect English words directly to meanings, emotions, and experiences. But you might be thinking, that sounds impossible. How can I possibly rewire my brain after all these years? And I understand that concern. I really do. It feels overwhelming when you think about changing something so fundamental about how your mind works. Here's the good news, though. Your brain is already capable of this. In fact, you probably already do this with some English words without even realizing it. Think about words like okay, hello, or bye. When you say these words, do you translate them first? Probably not. They've become direct connections in your mind. The secret, and this is just the beginning of what I'll teach you today, is to gradually expand this direct connection to more and more English expressions, but not through grammar exercises or vocabulary lists, through a completely different approach that works with your brain's natural learning patterns instead of against them. You see, there's a specific reason why some people seem to pick up natural English faster than others, and it has nothing to do with talent or intelligence. It has everything to do with understanding how your brain actually processes language when you're not trying to control it. I'm going to share with you the exact 3-step process that my most successful students use. But first, I need to explain why everything you've probably been told about speaking naturally is wrong. Because if you keep using the old methods, you'll keep getting the same frustrating results. Have you ever noticed that children who move to English-speaking countries start sounding like natives within months, while adults who study for years still struggle? It's not because children are smarter. It's because they instinctively use the natural learning process that adults have been taught to abandon. And here's something that will surprise you. The solution isn't to think less in your first language. It's to think differently about how you use both languages. There's a specific way to leverage your native language as a bridge to natural English, rather than as a barrier. I'll show you exactly how in the next section. Now, let me share with you the exact moment when everything clicked for one of my students, and how this can change your English forever. Remember how I mentioned that there's a specific way to use your native language as a bridge instead of a barrier? This is where it gets really practical. I was working with Carlos from Mexico, and he was incredibly frustrated. He could understand complex English movies, he could read business reports, but when he tried to have a casual conversation, he sounded like a robot reading from a textbook. Sound familiar? One day, I gave him a simple exercise. I asked him to describe his morning routine, but here's the twist. I told him to feel the experience first, then speak in English without planning the words. Just let the English come out while focusing on the actual experience, not the translation. The results were amazing. Instead of saying, "I woke up at 7 a.m. and then I brushed my teeth and prepared my breakfast," he said something like, "Man, I hate mornings. I dragged myself out of bed, and stumbled to the bathroom." Suddenly, he sounded natural, authentic, like himself. What happened there? He stopped translating and started expressing. This is the core of what I call experience-based speaking, and it's one of the 3 pillars I'll give you in just a moment. But let me give you more real examples because I know you're thinking, that sounds great, but how do I actually do this in my daily life? Think about when you're frustrated in traffic. In your native language, you might think something like, "This is so annoying, I'm going to be late again." Now, most English learners would translate this to, "This traffic is very annoying, and I will arrive late." Technically correct, but sounds like a textbook, right? But what if, instead of translating your thought, you connected directly to that feeling of frustration and let English words flow from that emotion? You might say something like, "Ugh, not again. I'm going to be so late." Or, "This traffic is killing me." These expressions come from the feeling, not from translation. Here's another example. You're at a restaurant, and the food is amazing. Your native language thought might be, "This food is really delicious. I love it." The translated version would be, "This food is very delicious. I like it very much." But if you connect to the actual experience of enjoying the food, you might naturally say, "Oh, wow, this is incredible." Or, "This is exactly what I needed." Do you see the difference? The translated versions are correct but sound stiff. The experience-based versions sound natural because they come from genuine feeling, not from language transfer. Now, you might be wondering, but how do I know these natural expressions? Where do they come from? This is where the second pillar comes in, and it's something you can start doing today. Instead of studying English as grammar rules and vocabulary lists, you need to collect natural expressions the way native speakers actually use them. But not just memorizing them, experiencing them in context. Let me tell you about Sarah from Germany. She was so frustrated because she knew thousands of English words, but when she spoke, she sounded like she was giving a presentation, even in casual conversations. The breakthrough came when she started what I call expression harvesting. Here's what she did, and what you can do too. Every time she watched an English show or video, instead of focusing on understanding every word, she focused on how people expressed common feelings and situations. When someone in the show was annoyed, how did they show it? When they were excited, what exact words did they use? But here's the key part, and this is what most people get wrong. She didn't just write down the expressions. She practiced feeling those emotions and letting those expressions come out naturally. She would literally stand in front of the mirror and practice being excited, annoyed, surprised, or curious, using the natural expressions she had collected. I know this might sound silly, but think about it. Actors do this all the time, and they sound completely natural in different languages because they connect the language to genuine emotions and experiences. You can start this today. The next time you're watching something in English, pay attention to how people express surprise. You'll notice they don't say, "I am very surprised." They say things like, "No way," or "Are you serious?" or "You've got to be kidding me." These expressions carry the emotion, not just the meaning. Here's a practical exercise you can try right now. Think of 3 emotions you express frequently in your daily life. Maybe frustration, excitement, and curiosity. Now, instead of translating how you express these in your native language, collect natural English expressions for each emotion by listening to native speakers. For frustration, you might collect, "This is driving me crazy. I can't deal with this," or "Give me a break." For excitement, "I'm so pumped. This is awesome," or "I can't wait." For curiosity, "I wonder what's that about?" or "Tell me more." But remember, collecting is just the first step. The magic happens when you practice using these expressions in real situations, connecting them to actual feelings rather than just memorizing them as phrases. Now, there's still one more crucial element to this puzzle, and it's probably the most important one. It's about timing and rhythm, and it's something that can make the difference between sounding like you're reciting lines and sounding like you're having a real conversation. I'll reveal this final piece in the next section, along with the complete 3-step system. All right, now we're getting to the part that most English teachers never talk about, but it's absolutely crucial for sounding natural. It's about rhythm, timing, and what I call conversational breathing. This is the third and final pillar that ties everything together. Have you ever noticed that when you speak your native language, you don't just use words? You use pauses, you change your speed, you emphasize certain parts, you sometimes trail off, and you breathe naturally between thoughts. But when you speak English, you probably sound much more monotone and careful, right? let me tell you about Ahmed from Egypt. He had excellent grammar, great vocabulary, but everyone could immediately tell he wasn't a native speaker. Not because of his accent. Accents are beautiful and natural, but because he spoke English like he was reading a news report. Every sentence had the same rhythm, the same careful pace. The breakthrough came when I taught him what I'm about to teach you. Natural English isn't just about the right words in the right order. It's about the music of the language, the ups and downs, the fast parts and the slow parts, the pauses that give meaning. Here's what changed everything for Ahmed, and what can change everything for you. Native speakers use what I call thought chunks instead of complete sentences. They speak in natural groups of words that represent complete thoughts, and they pause between these chunks to breathe and think. For example, instead of saying, "Yesterday I went to the store and I bought some groceries and then I came home and cooked dinner," a native speaker would naturally say something like, "Yesterday I went to the store, picked up some groceries, came home and, well, threw together some dinner." Notice the pauses. Notice how some parts are faster and others slower. Notice the little filler words like "well" and "you know." These aren't mistakes or signs of poor English. These are actually signs of natural, fluent speech. But here's what I want you to understand, and this is really important. You don't need to copy these exact patterns. You need to find your own natural rhythm in English, the rhythm that feels authentic to who you are. Let me give you a practical exercise that Ahmed used, and that hundreds of my students have used successfully. Record yourself having a conversation in your native language with a friend or family member. Just 5 minutes of natural conversation about anything, your day, your plans, your feelings about something. Then listen to that recording and pay attention to your natural rhythm. Where do you pause? Where do you speed up when you're excited? Where do you slow down when you're thinking? How do you use your voice to show emotion? Now here's the key insight. Your natural conversational personality doesn't need to change when you speak English. The goal isn't to become a different person. The goal is to let your authentic self express through English words instead of your native language words. This is where everything we've talked about comes together. Remember the experience-based speaking from earlier? Remember collecting natural expressions? Now add your own authentic rhythm and timing, and suddenly you're not just speaking English, you're being yourself in English. Let me share the complete 3-step system that brings all of this together. I call it the natural flow method, and it's what my most successful students use to break through from careful, translated English to natural, authentic English. Step 1 is feel first, speak second. Before you say anything in English, connect to the actual feeling or experience you want to express. Don't think about words first. Think about the emotion, the situation, the experience. Let that be your starting point. Step 2 is use expression bridges. Instead of translating your native language expressions, use the natural English expressions you've collected for that specific feeling or situation. These expressions become bridges between your authentic feelings and natural English sounds. Step 3 is flow with your natural rhythm. Don't try to speak like someone else. Use your own natural conversational patterns, your pauses, your speed changes, your emphasis, but with English words instead of your native language words. Here's how this looks in practice. Let's say you're running late for a meeting. Instead of translating, "I am late and I am worried," you feel the stress and urgency first. Then you use natural expressions like, "I'm so behind," or "I'm never going to make it." And you say it with your own natural rhythm, maybe fast and stressed, maybe with a frustrated sigh. The beautiful thing about this method is that it works with your brain's natural patterns instead of against them. You're not trying to become someone else. You're not trying to think differently. You're just letting your authentic self express through a different language system. But I know what you might be thinking. This sounds great in theory, but what about when I don't know the natural expression for what I want to say? And that's a completely valid concern. Here's the secret, and this is something that will probably surprise you. Native speakers don't always know the perfect expression either. Sometimes they pause. Sometimes they search for words. Sometimes they say, "How do I put this?" Or, "What's the word I'm looking for?" The difference is, they don't panic when this happens. They stay connected to their authentic communication style and work through it naturally. And you can do the same thing. In fact, some of the most natural-sounding conversations happen when people are figuring out how to express something complex or new. It's in those moments of authentic searching for the right words that real connection happens. So now you have the complete system. But there's one more thing I need to tell you about putting this all together and making it a natural part of your daily English practice. So here we are, my friend. We've covered a lot of ground today. And I want to bring it all together for you because this is where the real transformation begins. Remember at the beginning when I told you that thinking in your first language isn't your enemy? Now you understand why. It's not about stopping that natural process. It's about working with it differently. When you feel first and speak second, when you use expression bridges instead of word-by-word translation, and when you flow with your natural rhythm, you're not fighting against your brain. You're working with it. Think back to Maria, who felt like she had two personalities. Carlos, who sounded like a robot. Ahmed, who spoke like a news reporter. Sarah, who couldn't express her real personality. They all broke through using this exact same natural flow method. Feel first, use expression bridges, flow with your natural rhythm. The secret to speaking English naturally isn't about becoming someone else. It's about being yourself through English words instead of your native language words. Your personality, your humor, your authenticity, none of that needs to change. You just need the right system to let it shine through. Starting tomorrow, I want you to try just one thing. Pick one emotion you express frequently. Maybe excitement, frustration, or curiosity. Collect 3 natural English expressions for that emotion this week. Then practice connecting to that feeling and letting those expressions come out with your own natural rhythm. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to sound exactly like a native speaker from day one. You just need to start being authentically you in English, and the natural sound will follow. Before you go, do me a favor. If this episode helped you see English speaking in a new way, hit that like button and share it with another English learner who needs to hear this. Subscribe if you haven't already, because we're building something special here, a community where you can be yourself while mastering English. Until next time, keep practicing, keep being authentic, and remember, your English journey is uniquely yours.